It's better to be on mute. I guess it's time to start now. So welcome to the DRIP working group session. If you're not, if you did not expect that topic to be discussed, you're probably in the wrong room. We have the Notewell. I think you've been pretty familiar with that for now. We have also a new policy that asks you to behave properly. So I don't think we have had any problem in the past, but that's something we have been asked to pay attention. So basically try to, try to be always professional, try to be impersonal as much as possible. But hopefully this is what we have always been experimenting in that working group. So we have a minute taker, I guess. Just checking if the minute taker is here. Stu? Great. Thank you for doing that. For those that want to have a look at the meeting material, we have also the chat. Yeah, it's always hard to manage chat and queue, but I will do my best, and my co-chair is going to help me in doing so. So we have a pretty tough agenda. First point is the architecture, then the implementation, and then we will dive into the solution space. Try to don't go beyond the time slot we allocated to you. So where we are with the documents, so we have the requirements that is in the editor queue. So I don't know if our AD has any expected dates for publication, but hopefully it might be by the end of the year. Eric, you can say something, and you can also add anything you want to say.
No, I don't mean end of the year. We need to be lucky, though. January is most probably more better.
Anyway, it's not in our plate now. We do have a document I wish is going to be in the RFC queue by the end of the year. So this is I think now we are in version 17. So we had lately some tough activity on that. To me, it's really the one I would like to stress the people to get focused so that we can finally ship that one. And then we have some other documents that are more related in the solution space. I think we will probably need some discussion with CFRG. For those that attended CFRG this morning, we received very good feedbacks from at least the question we were asking. Doesn't mean we have responses. I mean, it might take a little bit of time, but as long as we get committed with CFRG, I see that as a good point. But Bob is going to tell us much more about this. So yeah, that's the solutions draft. And we're back to the agenda. So I'm removing the chat windows. That prevents me to click on the... And I think we can start. So you know how to, I mean, the first presenter is the architecture, so Shuai. I think you know how to, do you want to present or do you want me to present for you?
You can present or I can quickly go through for a minute. We don't want to waste our time.
Okay, so I mean,
go ahead.
okay, so I can't share those. So for those that don't know, you have to use I can stop the slide share. You can request sharing the slides.
Yeah, I requested.
Okay.
What's happening now?
So I think I have to. So I'm stopping sharing the slides and I'm giving you the screen.
Do I really want to share? Yes. Okay. Oh my God, what's happening? Is that good? I don't know.
Yeah, that's good. So for those, the other ones that we'll present later, you have an icon which looks like a document. So when you request, you will be able to request a specific presentation, which might be easier.
Okay, I don't know what you saw, guys. I saw like a mirror, basically million mirrors. Probably I just need gonna stop it. Maybe you can present.
Okay, so
sorry,
I'm going to present then.
Slide. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay, so. Okay, so the architecture. Okay, I'm sharing the slides.
Yeah, please go to. Hopefully this is going to be our last one. Next slide, please. So this is for the architecture. We had a 16. That was a month ago before the meeting. Most comments are editorial and content improvement. We have lots of them, but 16 actually trying to fix most of them. We had a few of the leftovers, and also my mistake. I have to say that I forgot something because the email coming from different places, and it's easy to forget. But anyway, so 16 actually fixed most of the comment. Race 17 we just had it on yesterday, which is was not on this slide. Had a more improvement. Go to the next slide, please. This is a little bit detail on 16 text improvement. I want to thank Sue for very detailed review. So I have never done this detailed review in my life, but thank you so much. And so mostly on the section 4, reflect some of the specific requirement. I think that's one of the comments from the working group. And also added 2 new sections which reflects on the solution space we had on the DRIP, which is one of the DRIP authentication and all of the DRIP contact. So that 2 sections is already in 16. 17 is also a little bit of text improvement. Next slide, please. This slide is not true anymore because we have the 17 published yesterday. Now we only have 8 editorial notes, which is added, a reminder for the things we need to finish. I think the first one is really the architecture figure. I believe Stu want to discuss a little bit. So I just want to say personally, I have no issues to update all the figures, but it's just the comments we get from the past 2 meetings really in the flux. So I want to make sure we actually agreed to improve that figure to a more complete figure. So once we agreed, and hopefully Stu can provide a little bit of text on that because it doesn't have a new component on this new figure. The second thing, even though everything is in the editorial, but the second thing is I remember is the 3GPP update, which is I forgot to put it on. Thanks, Matt, for the reminding. That will be on the final fix. Then on the let me think what's the other stuff. Yes, the rest is will be editorial and the text will be reviewed by the rest of the co-authors. Yes, next slide, please. So proposal the towards the publication and all agreed with the co-author and the chairs. So we're gonna have a final revision in 2 weeks. I hope we're gonna finish it in 1 week, but I put it 2 weeks and then another 2 weeks for the second working group last call. Then I think we should be ready to go. Yes, that's it. I think so. That should be the last one.
So, yeah, thank you, Shuai. So to me, what is important is that we stick to that schedule, which is in 2 weeks. I'm not especially talking to you, Shuai, but I mean for the others to come and to review, please be very reactive these 2 next weeks so that this document can be shipped finally. If you have to say anything, I mean, we are very few people, so I suggest that you don't ask for the queue. You can simply speak
Yeah.
and take the mic.
Actually, I think just one thing. I want to just I actually want to speak up a little bit regarding the figure thing. We need a consensus with the group. Once we are okay, then that's only one of the bigger things that I had in my mind, I think. Regarding the figure for the architecture figure, I think Stu has a really good, nice picture, but we haven't agreed we want to put on the architecture draft yet.
Okay, so one comment I have for the co-authors, because a lot of discussions are between the co-authors, and chairs and are usually copied, and probably other people. But I would recommend you to have those discussions happening on the mailing list so that everyone can see the document is active. At least some people are exchanging on that, and it's not something that is being discussed in the backstage or behind the door and imposed to the working group. So I would say that the way the document is being discussed is very nice, very good. I think for transparency, it might be better to bring that to the mailing list. So that's the only thing I can add.
Danielle, can I pop up that figure that Shuai mentioned?
Go ahead.
I've got a text editor open. How do I share it?
He's asking for screen.
Oh, you're asking for screen.
Because he's asking for screen so he can actually show the figure right now.
Okay, so are you asking for screen?
Yes.
Stu is.
I don't see your request.
Yeah, I clicked the button a few minutes ago.
Okay, so please re-click on it. Okay, I see the information. Oh, maybe I should. I don't know how to give it to you.
Shuai, do you have it?
Showing yours.
So let me check. I'm gonna stop sharing slide. Re-ask.
Now Stu, nice you would allow Stu.
Let me see if I can have it. I just don't think I have it.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. Let's grab that one.
Yeah, only one can share at a time.
Yep, and let me grab the window and drag it over there.
And I have no control on it.
Okay, everybody seeing that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, let me scroll down just a little bit so you can see the bottom 2 lines. It's standard ASCII art. Adam did it several months ago. We proposed it for inclusion in requirements. It was determined that it was too complex and didn't belong in requirements, but that my understanding of the comments was that it did belong in architecture. Shuai's understanding of the comments was that no, it was just plain too complex and confusing, period, and didn't belong in either of the documents. Shuai has mentioned that I'm introducing two new entities here, the Gpod and the Psod. I'm not introducing new entities at all. The note at the bottom of the figure explains them. If I put the words General Public Observer Device in that little box and Public Safety Observer Device in that little box, then this figure is just going to explode in size. So these are merely, this is a macro, if you will, to be expanded there, and this is a macro to be expanded there mentally by the reader. This is intended to show the full picture, because nowhere in requirements or architecture do we have the full picture of what's really going on in remote ID. That, for instance, a UAS consists of an unmanned aircraft and a ground control system. Sometimes it must be specifically the unmanned aircraft that does the wireless communications. Sometimes it can just as well be the ground control station. So anyway, this is the figure that we are proposing to show the big picture of all of the different relationships, except specifically over-the-air one-way broadcast remote ID broadcasts, which go to anybody in range and would hopelessly complicate the figure. So that is the proposal, and the question is, do we want this in architecture or do we not? I will mute.
So anyone wants to comment?
I
I think it would be nice to include a good picture.
seconded. I agree that the image is good to include in architecture. If anything, if there is no text in where we place it in Arch about, as Stu mentioned, not including the broadcast lines because it would hopelessly complicate the picture, that's the only thing that should end up in the text. If it's not there already, but I believe it is.
I believe that everything in this picture is in architecture. It's often not too clear. Sometimes we say it could be the UA or the GCS when we talk about the UAS doing something. And sometimes we talk about that the observer needs authorization. Why do we talk about the observer needing authorization? Well, that's because it's typically a public safety observer. So here in this picture, we do expand what's in the text. And maybe with this picture, I can go through the text and maybe point things a little better in the text to this picture to relate everything clear. Shuai's done a great job in getting the text in there, but I think this picture shows the whole thing, and that's all I have to say.
Fantastic. I think we had a consensus from my point of view right now. I think everybody agreed to have it.
Yeah, I think there's also a kind of a maybe more simplified version already in the architecture draft in Figure 4, right? So it seems like this just adds more detail, which seems like a good thing. And if there's no harm to add it, like, let's just do it.
Yeah, so
I think I got the point. If there's any, let's see if there's anybody objection. If there's no objections, then we can just skip that and move to the next one.
I will point out there was a comment from Med in the chat that he agrees it fits in the Arch. We just need to make sure in the narrative that some interfaces are not in the DRIP scope. And he gives DAA and V2V as an example, which I believe is already in the text.
I would just like to identify this as the context into which DRIP goes, not that this is DRIP.
okay, so I think we're pretty good. I mean, I haven't seen anyone opposing to have that figure in the draft. What I would like is that the figure with the draft, with the text being updated to have that figure being included by the end of the week. Does it sound like a plan?
this end of the week for this figure, I was actually thinking getting 18 revision as a whole to fix all the editorial fix. Currently
Okay.
we have like 8 of them. This figure can come together with the rest fix. And the only thing I mentioned in the, I think Stu mentioned as well. I think there's something new from the figures like DAA, everything. That wasn't my original concern, which is not in the drip architecture text at all. But I think Stu also clarified he will do something editorial to make sure all the terms were related to the architecture drip. So, which is great.
Yeah, it's also important to mention what is not in the scope of the group. So,
yeah, okay.
Okay, good.
Great.
Thank you. So next presentation. Andre, do you request the slides?
Yes.
I don't see you requesting.
Um,
and I
for
don't
me,
think
it shows
I
I'm in the queue for requesting.
Okay, so
I
okay,
just granted access.
yeah. Okay, that's you, Med, granting access.
Ah, okay. So I need to pick up. Okay, there.
Okay, so I'm going to give you
Okay,
the
it's the
access.
last one. Okay. Okay, let's try again. I pressed slide share request. Okay, just a second. I need to choose which one. Okay, share. You see now?
Yeah.
Good. All right, so I'm going to present our efforts to implement the DRIP architecture with a blockchain called Hyperledger Iroha, and it's work with a couple of students plus maybe 10 more who are participating in the code development. Okay, so as you know, we are making good progress with the requirements, and it's submitted for publication, and still some parts are under development. For example, the registries, how we should be keeping this drawn data, and how to handle authentication and access to this data. So in this work, we try to implement registry as a blockchain so that we can store, for example, drawn ID data and flight record and so on in this chain, and also record like who requests something from this chain, and later focus also on network remote ID, since our first priority is broadcast. So these are the requirements that this blockchain should satisfy. They are mentioned in this draft, requirements draft, which is now submitted for publication. So possibility to do public lookups, private lookups, let's say from authorized officers, and then provide authentication and provisioning of this registry. So we did like a complete implementation of a system, including this DRIP protocols, authentication formats, and also the blockchain access, and try to do some scalability measurements. Like I will show some simulations where we have like, let's say 100 drones operating in one area, and there are some requests to the system just to see like how scalable it is in practice. So about the architecture of the system. So it's a quite similar picture to what Stu has showed. So we have the drone who broadcasts messages, an observer who can verify this authenticity of this label, and also it stores them to this Iroha blockchain registry, which can be later queried by authorized users or public users. And The drones directly not participate in the blockchain, since we assume that maybe we don't even have internet connectivity. We just sort of broadcast using Bluetooth or Wi-Fi the messages. And this is the summary of the code that we did. So this authentication part is based on OpenHIP implementation, HIP version 2 crypto branch, which was extended to support things we specify for DRIP, such as C-shake and hierarchical hits. So this part is public. It's on Bitbucket, so I think anybody can download it right now. And the second part is some scripts that we wrote, for example, to upload the things to the blockchain and verify broadcasted hits. So this is still private, but we hope we can publish it in the end of the year. Okay, so this why blockchain Iroha? Because it has some nice properties like Byzantine fault tolerance. So if there is some nodes failing, it's possible to add like more nodes, and also it's possible to control who can get access and support public and private lookups. So this is an example of records that we are putting to the blockchain. Okay, about the security analysis. Well, we think that it satisfies the requirements stated for the registry, because it based on permission access, so that like a new authorized user only can add new, let's say, drones to the system, and also it keeps track on who is accessing what. And it has some nice features like multi-signature transactions and smart contracts. So what does it give? With multi-signature transactions, it's possible that a record is signed by several entities. So if, for example, ground station is compromised, it's not enough to compromise the whole system, but also need to compromise the drone, for example. And using smart contracts, it's kind of good to know, so it keeps track of who actually accesses this data. So for example, if some officer accessed it like outside of his duty or something like that, it could be later tracked and verified. And in terms of performance evaluation, we created it using Amazon Virtual Cloud. So we were running a few Iroha nodes over there. And then the few simulated drones were submitting its like broadcast ID data to this system. And then our users were querying this information. So just to get understanding of how well it performs. Okay, so we had some simulations with 100 or 200 drones like flying nearby, which should be like more than enough for a small place. And in general, the performance was good. So it was like 10 millisecond delay from the drones to the system. And this is the data which was transmitted. So coordinates, altitude, speed, timestamp, and so on, what is now required in EU for regulations for drone ID, total 123 bytes, but it can be also compressed to STSM, which is much shorter, like 24 bytes. And obviously, the more data you transmit, the more hungry it will be for blockchain storage. And this is the configuration that we looked for used for Iroha, so it adjusts the performance of his blockchain. And here are some features. So, like for example, here is 16 blockchain nodes and 100 drones, and we are sending some updates and queries. So you can see it's pretty reasonable performance, so a few hundred milliseconds max for these queries, and also variability presence, but still like moderate. And this is the size of blockchain blocks which are being committed to a system. So that's basically it. So to summarize, we have code for DRIP authentication part, and also for blockchain storage part. It's currently over Bluetooth 4, but we are extending to Bluetooth 5 and also to Wi-Fi neighborhood awareness mode, which maybe is now being replaced by something else, like Bob mentioned. Yeah, we hope to have a complete prototype with flying drone being tested end of the year. So if you have any questions, please.
If I see no question, for the sake of time, I'd like to switch to the next presentation. So while the next presentation, the next presenter is taking control, Olle, please jump in and ask your questions. So next presenter. I think that's Bob. Yeah. I think any questions while Bob is selecting his slides?
This
Okay,
works.
Good.
I think there's a
This
question
works.
in the chat, if Andre wants to answer it in chat as Bob starts.
Okay, so let me get going here. Changes since the last IETF, which was version 8. We're now on version 13. So we have a name change. We're now calling these DRIP entity tags, which ties in nicely with what ASTM is calling things. We call these entity tags, which is the UAA name for hierarchical hits. So this is just, so when you see DET, in this particular usage, it is a hierarchical hit, but it's in the larger framework of what we're naming in UAS, which is the entity tag, which is the entity. I pulled all the proof messages from the draft. I'm going to rely and align with DRIP auth, and no longer has specific message formats here. Adam and I have had a lot of going back and forth, as he'll cover in his auth version. We've really plowed through together and come to agreement on that aspect. I've aligned with the next version of ASTM F3411, removing thus the version designation and change requests. The work group is bogged down in some radio issues, which is going to force them to reballot. We don't expect to have any changes in our needs on this, but Yogi Bear did say something about you got to, it ain't all over until it's over. But we don't expect those changes, so we're going forward as if our changes are needed, stay as is through the final balloting. But thus we take the year out because it won't be published in 21. I've completed DET mapping to the CTA 2063A. This is for remote ID module. It's a principal application target, and I have an example. And for those of you who have not really looked at the FAA final rules, FAA defines something they call a standalone module that can be attached to a UA to meet for backwards compatibility for meeting the remote ID requirements. And these modules must send their serial number. So what if that module manufacturer wants to use DRIP? How can they do that? Here's a way to map the hierarchical hit into the 2083 format so they can comply with the FAA requirements and still then take full advantage of everything that we've done here. That is the purpose of this, the principal purpose of this section. The privacy section, DET privacy section has been added, or perhaps I should say the lack of privacy, because you are on an open broadcast media. I hope I have done a good job of this. I've not gotten a review by anybody in the IETF on this. I've asked over in the privacy work research group, no response yet from them. And the security consideration section has been expanded, particularly the second image attack possible with modern custom ASICs. Thank you, CFRG, for some response on this, but I'm working more with CFRG to see if there's anything else I need to have here. One thing that this indicates is how important the registration process is, because there is an attack and thus a loss of trust if we don't have the registration. So Adam and I will next be working on the registry draft. We're rolling up our sleeves on that with everybody else who with assist us on that. That's why the two of us want to finish DRIP RID and DRIP Auth so we can focus on DRIP registries. As I indicated, I now strongly rely on both DRIP Auth for the attestation proofs, and I will be relying strongly on DRIP registries as our mitigation for attack against the size of our hash. So in terms of work status, there are two known implementations. AX Enterprise, Adam, thank you. And Andre Students, thank you, Andre, for your work. And we're looking for other implementations, of course, that may be out there or people are planning on doing. I feel now at this point I am done except for fine tuning. People may take some issues with the DNS examples formats. Those are malleable. We can, if people want different ones, we can deal with that. But I think that this document is now complete and it is ready for workgroup last call. I now open up for questions.
Please go, Robin.
Robin, yes?
Robin, we cannot hear you if you're speaking.
Shows its mic's on, but I don't hear him. I think real soft. I mean, barely hear you, Robin. Oh well, Robin went away. Maybe he'll put it on the chat. Anybody else wants to contribute or say anything about the remote ID work itself? I'd like this for our chairs to make the workgroup last call and get this moving along and get it off the IESG as soon as we can. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Bob. I'll check that with my co-chair, and eventually we will do that. Have to check with Med. So, Robin, when you're back, just ask your question, and in the meantime, we're going to continue with Adam.
Oh, is the audio working now?
Yeah, it is working.
Terrific. Sorry about that sudden audio fail syndrome. So when Bob was talking about the importance of registration for these endpoints, it just made me wonder whether the RATS working group has what you would need. So, you know, the ability to make secure remote attestations about a particular device or endpoint. There might at least be some design patterns there that you could capitalize on. I was trying not to say plagiarize, but, you know, reuse.
Well, Adam, you've been following RATS, and
I've been
perhaps you can
following
comment a bit.
RATS. I definitely think that an implementation using RATS is possible. I haven't thought that deeply into it, unfortunately, which is probably not a good thing. But it's definitely open to be the way forward.
Yeah. So, Robin, do you think that we should act as a verifier or as an interested party in that case?
Ooh.
Yeah, that's kind of where I kind of stopped thinking about it, because I wasn't in a position ready to make that call. Because I didn't have quite a lot of the architecture sorted out yet. Now I think I am a little bit closer to that. It's good that you brought it back up. Could be both.
I mean, some of the use cases for RATS are aimed at things like mobile devices or hardware two-factor authentication tokens, that kind of thing, where the entity manufacturing, producing, and distributing the physical endpoint is not necessarily the entity with whom the user has the operational relationship. So in that sense, I suppose there are probably parallels with the drone deployment case, because you'd want very close collaboration between the manufacturer and the so the hardware manufacturer, the avionics developers, and the operational force actually using the device.
Right.
So I mean, RATS might have some patterns, but so the other thing that occurs to me just off the top of my head also is there's a lot in Suit that might be relevant too.
Yes.
Because these are essentially connected things. Yeah. And apologies, you've probably been down this path already, so I'm coming to it late. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
No,
We've been looking more at reg extensions for the registration process. That's where most of our attention has been, and looking how EPP could be leveraged for that. But definitely, I'll go back to look at RATS again. I was at the beginning of it, but stepped away from it, and maybe I can rattle Hank's rat cage and get something from him on it.
Right.
Terrific. Great. Thanks, Bob.
Stu here. I don't know if we'll be able to use actual RATS formats or protocols given the need for extreme compactness over the air here. But if we look at, their patterns, those might be very instructive.
Agreed. I agree with that 100%.
And then
I'm going to
obviously for really constrained environments, you've got ACE as well.
True. Okay, I'm going to transition to my slides. So because I have 15 minutes to go through all of this. So this is the authentication formats. It was obviously there was a name change. So changing since 01 when it was adopted, we've gotten a new title, much like Bob's draft. I rearranged a lot of sections for some clarity. I followed Bob's example, removed F3411-19 explicit references and just use F3411 because the draft very much lines up with the in-ballot or soon to be in-ballot F3411. And then some high-level overviews. Section 3.3 was updated. I reordered some formats. There was a new operational recommendations added, and appendices got shifted all around. So the Section 3.3 rework at a high level, It's still an overview of the current ASTM authentication message. It was reworked massively to make it clear but remain abstract due to the licensing copyrights of the ASTM document, because you have to pay for it. We cannot just blindly copy paste in, so I have to abstract away some stuff and abstract not the concept, but a lot of the fields. I'll go into more detail on the F34v1.1 specific changes that were made. We have a new constraint section, which I'll go into, and F3411v1.1 is reballoting, as Bob said, later this year. Due to the process, it will probably become F3411-22, not -21 like everyone had hoped earlier this year. So specific v.1 changes. First off, there was the inclusion of a new authentication type called SAM, the specific authentication method. And it's a means to add authentication formats after F3411 was published. Because of the process to publish the document, if someone came with a new authentication method or type, it would mean changing the standard, pulling the working group together, reballoting, sending it. It would just take too long. This is now there's one authentication type, and there's a byte at the very start of the authentication data, taking away a byte that we could use that multiplexes. And that byte has been decided by ASTM to be maintained by ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization. And so the working group will need to submit a request for some values in this field. They're going to follow very similar field requests, much like IANA. In fact, kudos to Bob. Bob was instrumental in helping the ASTM write some prose text, basically taking some stuff from IETF's IANA considerations and retooling it for ASTM so that ICAO could take up a role somewhat similar to this. The other change that was massive was the additional data length and additional data field. These are more pseudo fields because we have now all 16 pages available to us on the authentication message, but only a subset of them can be actually used over broadcast due to media constraints, which I'll get into later. So this field is where we put our forward error correction. And so the figure on the right, you can see is excerpts from the draft as it is now. So figure 1 is a page of authentication, and figure 2 is the layout of the fields found across those pages. And the last figure, the very bottom figure, is what happens when the SAM code is placed into it, because we're auth type 5. So you can see where the FEC would be and where all the data would be. So the forward error correction, because that was changed, it used to be an appendix, it was pulled up into the main draft, it was retooled to use the additional data field. And I reworded a lot of the text to make it clear. There was some redundancy in multiple places across the document, so that redundancy was removed, and it drove a bit better of a constraint. Okay, thanks, Ben. So FEC was aligned. We need to FEC page align. We need to do Reed Solomon potentially with multi-page FEC, because now we can do it. And there was some discussion between the authors about doing something with more than auth. The broadcast attestation structure is another section. It's brand new. Well, kind of new, but it's been modified. It fits within the SAM authentication data. The signing timestamp was removed by me in the last revision. There was some back and forth between the authors on if this is really what we want to do, because it was kind of an ad hoc change. It will either be re-added or stay removed. Importantly, this structure is what gives us self-attestation of the DET, and it confirms possession of the key asserted by the broadcast attestation, which is in the DRIP link message, which is the attestation that comes from the registry process. There are lots of broadcast attestations, potentially. Do we send them all? Do we only send a subset of them? A link type was added to multiplex against these because we aren't at the 200 byte limit, so losing a byte, but we're only 4 pages in, is kind of whatever. Appendix B has an example of this. The DRIP manifest got some reworking. The hash lengths were changed. We added some text to define how to hash messages. And there was a variable window byte added, which needs to get more well-defined. It was something from Bob. The big takeaway, if you take anything away from as I speed through these slides, is the DRIP link plus the manifest together gives us the trust we need, because we take the DRIP link, which tells us what we do, tells us that the key can be trusted because of the registry, and then the manifest, because it's dynamically signed by the aircraft, validates the ownership of that key that was asserted. And there is some text on having to send the DRIP link, but also send some dynamic data. The DRIP frame is another thing. It's more for future proofing, so I won't go too much into it. It might need a rename. There's a recommendations and requirements section that has all the recommendations and requirements for DRIP to be run. This is where, again, we get the assertions and the recommendations to send the other link messages. Operational recommendations needs to get reviewed, and appendices got moved all over the stuff, over the place. This is a new appendice that I need to make and fix up. And finally, the to-dos. Bob has some things he wants to look into. FEC needs to be cleaned up and fixed. The manifest window, operational recommendations needs to be reviewed and possibly expanded. I might need an ICANN considerations now. I need to do Appendix A, Appendix B. I'd want a flow diagram. And for next steps, I'm going to get a V4 with these pending issues done. I'm going to hopefully get an IoT sector early review given, and then do another release earlier next year, and then we will hopefully have a working group last call. That's that. Because I'm next, I'm going to immediately jump into the next set of slides. If I can change my deck, which I will. So I'm going to immediately jump into registries, which we kind of started going down that rabbit hole. So since 0.0,
questions on auth?
Bob, I don't have time for questions.
Yeah.
I got to keep going. So
Okay.
for registries, if you have questions, send it to the list, please. So for registries, since 0.0, it expired. I fixed it. I brought it back up. It expanded from 11 to 36 pages. The attestations that were in auth are now in registries. So Bob might actually have to change, saying he's looking at auth, instead look at registries. And then I started doing some stuff. Overall, this is a mess because this is literally all my notes, all my thoughts, Bob's thoughts, Stu's thoughts, all thrown into the draft and trying to give some order. So it's a nightmare. Please try to grok it as best as you can. Some texts were borrowed from DRIP drafts, other DRIP drafts. The definitions, claims, assertions, attestations, and certificates section is in 3 places now. I don't like things being in 3 places. We should probably select where it lives forever. It's most in line with Arch. And section 4 was from Appendix B of auth. It was reorganized, set into subsections, and has a new section 4.1. This is section 4.1 on the left, and on the right is a document to show the relationship between all the different attestation and certificate formats that are defined in the document. I will be putting this diagram into the draft once I figure out the SVG stuff that was commented on in the chat. The registry classes and entities, this is attempting to make a set of terms to talk about registries easier, potentially. So there were, and define some special registries that exist in the ecosystem. So this is the generalized high-level view of all of the registries that exist, the root, the IRM, the MRA, CAAs, or just RAs in general, and remote ID registries, which would most likely be USSs, UTM service suppliers. And we can see the interactions that are required from the unmanned aircraft or UAS system to given registries and from the observer. and how it relates to broadcast grid. The FQDN definitions are now here as well. They need to be harmonized with UAS or DRIP grid. There are some open questions that we have to sort out, and that will go to the list. The DNS records, I have a list of the DNS records I propose that we would probably be using and the justification for their use, and some specific NS records that are needed that I found as I began my implementation. And then there's a whole section about registry operations. It's basically section 9 trying to become technical instead of prose. It's a mess. Please make it human readable because it's only Atom readable right now. So implementation, we finally have something for registry implementation at AX Enterprise. It's deployed on a development kube cluster, so it's not available publicly. It's a rough HTTP API to register all the different entities that I mentioned before. It manually updated DNS zones, but it took like 4 months because of a lot of other things that were happening. But the good news was, in the past 2 months, we've been transitioning and doing stuff with EPP and RDAP, much like the architecture said we probably should be doing. So we have been working on that. I have some XML tag definitions that probably have to be into the draft for IANA considerations, and RDAP is starting very soon. So next steps on registries. I have to refine section 4. Section 8 needs a lot of help because it's just a wall of text that is badly organized. We need to clean up and refine the revisioning process, which kind of aligns with section 8. It's very US centric, so we might want some EU inputs. We need to do EPP RDAP stuff. And then we need PII protection to protect the serial number and other things. So my plan is to work with Bob extensively to do the X509 stuff that he, I think, has in the pipeline. And this draft is very important as it supports not only -auth and is referenced by UASRID, it also supports operator privacy potentially, another draft by Bob. So the question is, when do we want to adopt this document? It's gone in and out. It was said for many months that we'd do it. It never got released, and it finally got a -00, which then immediately expired. So do we want to adopt this soon so it falls into the working group so that it actually gets the love and attention that it deserves? And I think I just blazed through that faster than I wanted to, and hopefully Stu got as many things as he could. So any questions or comments if we have any, but I see we have like 2 minutes left for this session in general. And just for reference, on this image cartoon, Stu's the one sitting at the desk and I'm the one with the hat on looking at him questionably. I'm done.
Okay, so one question maybe?
Sure.
One comment.
Fire. Who wants to fire?
So I checked with my co-chair, and we will start a call for adoption very soon. And if there are no other questions, if Med wants to add something, please.
I have one item to report, Daniel.
Go, Stu.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, I just wanted to let everyone know that observer to pilot communications, which is something we have talked about a little from the first, but there's been a lot of concern about whether that's really a good idea or not. There was a recent meeting in the US involving many federal agencies, and it emerged from that meeting that there is now a wide recognition across those agencies of the need for, indeed, as we've here in DRIP have said from the first, RID information to be immediately actionable. And since you don't want that action always to be taking down someone's aircraft that is straight into an area where it probably shouldn't be, it would be really great if we could immediately establish communications between the observer and the pilot but they have indicated that there's a requirement there that those be private communications. When the observer wants to talk to a pilot, doesn't want just anybody who is eavesdropping on RID to also be able to eavesdrop on those communications.
Yeah. So my perspective is that it's something that is happening from the information we gather from the registry. So I would see that as a second step once we have all the draft that we have presented and talked so far about that are RFCs or in the RFC editor queue. No?
We work in this area right now. I just wanted to let everybody know that it's on the horizon.
Okay. Okay, good. Okay. Thank you, everyone. So I think it's time to close this meeting. Thank you for the participation. Please be active on the mailing list. I'm talking to everyone there, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I feel like I ran a marathon.